Hello and welcome to Two Mutables in a Pod. This podcast weaves our life experience with our love for astrology, alternative healing and Black culture. My name is Mimi.
And my name is Emily, and we are your hosts. And welcome to the Two Mutables in a Pod podcast.
Hello and welcome to season 2. We've made it. We are here with a brand new season, a whole new feel, a whole new look, and a brand new episode. This episode is called The Veil of Chiron and the Mirror of Saturn, healing through the first house and seventh house axis. Now, I'm going to start by saying why this title and then kind of what inspired it. So we're going to go into what Chiron is and what Saturn is if you have your chart accessible. But as an overarching energy, I kind of feel like Chiron is something that you can see through, but also something that is masked. And I know that Emily's going to provide all of the depth and the history in regards to Chiron. But literally imagine Chiron as a veil, something visible to you, but also clouds your vision into the external world. Now, the mirror of Saturn is something that I feel like can get missed with Saturn. Saturn has a beautiful way of reflecting the shit that you don't even want to see, the stuff that you don't want to acknowledge, but it's there and it's visible. So again, we'll expand on this, but Emily and I wanted to speak on Chiron and Saturn because we both have this in different signs, but same places within our chart. So we both have Chiron in the first house and Saturn in the seventh house. And just through conversations that Emily and I have had about life, we kind of come back in some way, shape or form to speaking about this, especially Saturn. And if you're not following Emily on Medium, please do, because Emily has some beautiful posts, especially in the last how many months? I say 6 months. 6 months?
Yeah.
About her reflections of Emily being in her Saturn return, and Saturn in Pisces has been a lesson for all of us. But when you are going through your Saturn in return, that provides a whole new layer and depth of experience. So it's been ever present for us to speak about it. And of course, as I mentioned, Emily and I have both of these placements in different signs. And I really just want to highlight, even though Emily and I will be speaking about the common places that they're in, we have them in different signs. So if you are looking at your chart and you're finding some familiarity, please also add the addition of the flavor that the sign is going to bring to your own individual experience. And this is our own perspective, our own journey, and our own experience that we just want to share with other people, because I feel it's incredibly healing. So let's get into it.
Oh my gosh, I really love that intro. And, when you mentioned the history, I was like, have you been prying on me? How did you know I was going to go down there? But, for those of you who might have listened to season 1, and just us speaking about our sun signs and our moon signs, I love history, I love mythology. So of course I'm going to take it there. But just echoing from what you said, I think we do meet in the middle when it comes to our experiences with life, pain, realizations, and that first house, seventh house weighing scale. So I am going to take us on a bit of a history trip as we look at the histories and origins of Chiron. Now, we typically hear, depending on what level you are, but, even if you're a beginner, advanced practitioner, student, or just lover of astrology, we typically hear of Chiron as being the archetype of the wounded healer. And I think in order to really understand what that means, we kind of have to trace back the origins back to Greek mythology. Now, I have spoken to my Greek friends, so I'm going to try and get the pronunciations quite well. But, one thing that stood out to me is, typically we refer to Chiron as, Chiron, the Latin translation or the way we say it in English. But in Greek, it's said and it's pronounced as Chiron. And I think, the translation of that means to be skilled with hands. It's the work that you do with your hands. And I think the history and the story behind this particular part of our chart is quite interesting. So I'm just going to give some context and history before I go on to explain what my personal hot take on Chiron is. So essentially, we have a Titan Cronus. He, is Chiron's father. He is on a quest to, eliminate his 6 kids because there has been some sort of prophecy that says one of his kids might overtake him. So he's on a conquest to eliminate all of these potential kids that could potentially, overtake his throne. And Rhea, one of the queens, the goddesses, she essentially goes over to Crete to hide Zeus. Right? And we typically hear of Zeus. If you've watched Hercules, you might have come across Zeus. Now, in this quest, Cronus he comes across an oceanid, which is essentially a sea nymph, and is attracted, lured in. They get it on together. And from this, I want to say rompage, arises Chiron. Now, Chiron, the birth, bringing forth Chiron was not easy and it did not come without pain. And because at the time, Cronus was essentially trying to hide from Rhea, who also was scouring the land, trying to figure out where is Cronus? Where the hell is he at? He essentially had to morph into a horse. And in morphing into a horse, this also had an effect on the way that Chiron came forth into this earth. And you typically see the depictions of Chiron as being half human, with the upper body being human, and the lower part of his body being, animal form, a horse-like form. So that came about through that. And essentially, that brought about great shame, disgrace, you can say. And essentially, his mother abandoned him on this mountain because she just couldn't bear. She already had to go through the painful birth of bringing him forth. And then to look at the physical form, it was just too much for her to accept him. So then he was taken in by Apollos, who essentially became his guardian. He trained under him. He was taught healing arts, music, prophecy, and a lot of the things that we know to be skilled with the hands. As I say, in Greek, for example, Chiron also can be linked to the earlier translations to being a surgeon. So, he was skilled in pharmacy. He was skilled in medicine. He also tutored quite a lot and he was widely sought after. So, you can imagine being taught by Apollo, he learned a lot of things. And I think having gone through his own abandonment, being abandoned by his mother, he was then shown some form of love. And he really poured into his healing through wisdom, knowledge, and teaching and helping others acquire that. Now, essentially, I'm going to fast forward a bit down the timeline. But essentially what happens is that, Chiron is then caught in a crossfire where Hercules is essentially trying to guard a cave. And in this crossfire, he is shot down with a bow and arrow. Now, the bow arrow is, I want to say, is laced in some sort of venom. So essentially, that venom then becomes incurable because it's poisonous. There is no cure for this. And with all the wisdom in the world that he has, bearing in mind he is sought of quite highly by students across the land to be taught by him, there was no pain for this suffering. And one of the things to note about Chiron is that he was immortal. So he, could live through, basically could not die because he had everlasting life. So just imagine having to live with the wound and the pain of, poisonous venom, but there's no cure for this. And you're in great, immensible pain. And essentially what happens is that, he then strikes a deal with Hercules to, I want to say, transition into the afterlife, to give up his immortality, to then become fixed in the constellation of stars. And he is also, and one thing that really wowed me is I didn't know that he basically became what we know Sagittarius to be in the constellations. So he became fixed in the stars as that. And he's also referred to as a great and wise centurion, very wise, very knowledgeable. He was fair, just. Some people say that, unlike other centaurs who are quite, brutal, shall I say. He was very reasonable. He was very fair, and he even went on to, I want to say, adopt another child who also went through abandonment. So that's kind of the history or the mythology that I wanted to talk through. And now over to the fun stuff. So my understanding of Chiron as as a small body in the world that we live in the planets that are above us, it's a small icy body, and it's situated between Saturn and Uranus. And to me, when I first came across this and read this on Reuters, I was like, oh, okay, it's an icy body. And it's also between Saturn and Uranus. And as you know, these two planets don't go without transformation and change. They often force us and propel us into paths, destinies that we might not necessarily always be ready for. And I think when we look back to the story of Chiron being associated with pain, pain first through his birth of being abandoned, and then pain again through being wounded with poison venom, which could not be cured. You can almost trace that down to like the materials and the elements that surround this icy body. It's full of water, it's full of ice and rocks. And I think, that's quite cold. It's not like your warm Jupiter planet that's full of like, solar rays, or it's the sun. It's a very icy body. It's a very, I want to say, concentrated matter. And I think with this asteroid situated between Saturn and Uranus, you can already imagine the amounts of the exacerbation of the types of experiences that you might go through. And now when I look at this in an astrological perspective, I like to think of Chiron as the antidote to healing others, and through learning and acquiring, through the skill of our hands, through the experiences that we journey through life, through the first on experiences that we go through, whether it's physical, mental, emotional, we are then equipped with the knowledge, the wisdom, the insights, the gift to help and assist others through their journey. Now, I don't think the pain ever truly ends. Now, that is open to debate or reflection, but I think it's something that we become accustomed to living with, but it's also the tool to assisting others. And I think, mirroring the story of Chiron, he used that abandonment, and he was taken under the wing by Apollo, and he learned what he needed to learn. He was able to acquire the knowledge to help, and I think help others learn and become empowered. And I think through that was also healing for him, should I say, after going through that abandonment where his mother just left him on an island to essentially perish and die. And I think it's important to understand that, in our charts, some astrologers might argue that Chiron was recently formed. So it was recently discovered in 1977 by Charles Cowell. And, I think Hellenistic or traditional astrologers don't necessarily consider this planetary body in their analysis as such, but modern astrologers tend to. So again, I think it's also evidence in the charts of great healers, people who are here to do service work, people who are here to help, navigate and guide people through this journey. So I think, understanding the mythology and the story, if you ever have time to go through it, really helps to provide context. But for me, in my own personal words, this particular part of our chart speaks to the antidote to healing others. It does not come without pain, and it is a pain that we live with. And I want to say live with, but live throughout as well, because in living throughout it, we actually understand that it's something that still affects us. It's something that is very real and raw, but we are willing to use the lessons, the life lessons, the hacks, the tools, the things that we learn with our hands, the skilled labor that we learn to help and assist others. So I hope that has, shed a light on what Chiron is. And, if it's ever inspired you to go ahead and do some research, I can also include some of the links that I use to provide some context. So now I'm going to go into the sign that I have Chiron in. And for me, my natal Chiron placement is situated in Virgo. And, Virgo tends to deal with the wellness, the routines, you might say. It can do with, I want to say with food. It can speak to food or the ways in which food is used to heal the body, what we ingest and what we put into our digestive systems. I want to ask you, Mimi, before I go on to explain what sign you have your Chiron in. That's what I want to ask.
First of all, I wish that people could see you when you speak about like history, mythology, and anything that you've researched, because Emily literally glows when she speaks. Like she's in her bag when she does that. Like, talk about being in your element. So thank you. I wanted to really thank you for sharing that, because I learned a lot from you, like sharing that, but also like just it's beautiful to see you glowing in that way.
Oh,
Um,
thank you.
I have my Chiron in Leo. So, kind of like what you said, I'll just give a quick summary. So, how I perceive Chiron in Leo is expression, but
Mhm.
expression of the heart. So, things that truly matter to us, things that are just within the heart's desire, I guess, and how we show the world that and how we express that. And I
Mhm.
think it also extends to visibility and that feeling of being center stage, being seen, being loud and proud effectively. But yeah, what experiences have you had with Chiron?
As you were speaking, like, you said the heart, and I immediately, Leo is a solar energy, right? It's a fire sign, and the heart, like, I just saw this image of the heart being lit alight. And I think also quite like, Virgo or Chiron in Virgo, I think Virgo tends to deal with the body a lot, the voice, but, in a different way. But I like how you mentioned the heart. And I think when I think of Chiron and Virgo, I think about the body, I think about the physical vessel, and I think about also some of the ways that we might share our stories, but just in different ways from how Leo might express that as well. So, as Mimi
Yeah.
said, there are different flavors. I like to think about these analogies or these teachings as different layers of your ingredients. Like, just imagine yourself in a kitchen. You've got your chopping board, you've got your knife, you've got your seasoning things that you use to season your food. You've got your pots and your pans, and you've got all the ingredients that you need to really cook up a storm in the kitchen. And I like to think about these things, the signs, the planets being one thing, the signs being another expression, and then your degrees, the aspects also adding on the additional flavors and the vavavoom to the overall thing that we're looking at today. So I love that expression of the heart when you speak about Chiron and Leo. And I think in the first house, for my particular experience, it really deals with the the world around us, but how we feel comfortable in the world that we live in, how the physical vessel feels comfortable, and also the discomfort, how we feel the discomfort in the world that we live in. And I'm going to speak a bit specific to the Chiron and Virgo placement in the first house. But I think for a very long time, as I've said in previous episodes, I've always looked at my Placidus chart. So, looking at my whole sign chart was a whole different epiphany. It was like, oh, okay, it makes sense why I sometimes can't stand my own physical image. It makes sense why sometimes that brings me discomfort to, even if I look in the mirror for too long, I'm like, oh, this is very uncomfortable for me because my physical vessel, which is Chiron in the first house, isn't used to that. There's some sort of unacceptance around the way my appearance is, critiquing my physical self. And these can also be through the words that are internally digested through my heart, soul, spirit, and nervous system. And I think also, yes, the nervous system plays a big role, I think, with this particular sign in this Chiron placement. But I think in the first house, it really speaks to how we also are perceived by others, by the world around us, the discomfort in the world that we live in, and some of the places, I think, I'm just imagining some of the experience at times where I've been in places and I felt, the public world around us are the places, the things we visit, see, and, are a part of. And sometimes I think back to me being in public and just thinking, oh, all eyes are on me. Why are people staring? And it's the internal dialogue that goes on. So yeah, I'm very interested to hear how you feel this placement and this particular asteroid shows up for you in your life in the
Yeah.
first house.
Gosh, so much. And just with what you were saying about yours being in Virgo,
Mm-hmm.
I forgot to mention a bit earlier, there was something about nourishment and how you nourish
Mm-hmm.
yourself, how the world nourishes you that was coming up. That word nourishment kept coming up. For me, I loved when you said that nervous system, because for you it's the nervous system response, whereas I think for me it's a sensory response.
Oh my
And
god. Mm-hmm.
that difference in that slight difference in expression. So very much like Emily, I will experience almost like a heightened level of anxiety sometimes, like being out in the public, but more so about how I'm being perceived. And then that will create an internal dialogue. But for me, it's not necessarily a critiquing of the self. It's more I'm experiencing this within my sensory system. I will often say I feel overloaded, overwhelmed, oversubscribed, like it's just too much.
Yeah.
And it's the environment that can really be a massive trigger for me. And just as Emily was speaking, I was like, that makes so much sense, because like the nervous system being related to the physical, and also the sensory being the physical. But for me, somehow my sensory body is so intertwined with my emotions and how I feel, and then how I'm then perceiving what's going on in my body. So it's so fascinating to hear the slight variations of that. But I remember there was a time, and I hope you don't mind me sharing this, where you asked me something along the lines of like, do I feel like people are like looking at me or staring at me when I go out in public?
Yes.
And I really remember having to think deep, because it was more an experience that I had growing up, and then like into my teens and then early 20s. And I remember saying to you, yes and no, because I feel like a lot of my journey has been about unmasking and really just like, why do I do this, and why do I feel like this in a certain environment? And like a part of unmasking for me, and again, I see this as the Leo aspect, was being very aware of the people that I was surrounding myself with, and then how I felt in their presence, and then what I was kind of barricading myself with as a result of being in that experience. So it was like I had like literally seen me putting on like layer after layer, coat after coat, and just getting bigger and bigger and bigger, so that I wouldn't be visible as in me, the core of me. So there was a lot of layers that I had to shed, and I'm still shedding, obviously, lifetime's work.
Yeah.
In terms of how I relate to the sensory and environment experience, and then how it relates or filters through my body. Yeah.
Do you know what? Like, so many epiphanies and light bulb moments were happening here. And I think when you spoke about the unmasking, and you know how I like to associate Leo energy, or Leo the sign, with theatrics, you know, with the artistic arts. And, you know, the very fact that you felt that you had all these multiple jackets that you putting on, and essentially you were masking around people who, and I noticed how you mentioned the type of company that you had, or the type of people that were around you, also played a big role. And I think that also links back to the heart space. And then, you know, we are going to go on to the seventh house, how our relational, interpersonal relationships affect that as well. But I can see how all of these things really shine a light on that Chiron and Leo for you. And I also think one thing that I find very interesting is that, you know, when I did ask you that question, it was something that you thought about and you reflected on in your earlier years. And, you know, Leo, I do also think Leo is expansive energy. It's also about, you know, being young at heart. And it's quite interesting that those experiences happened for you whilst you were in your younger years, teenage years, but not so much in your present adulthood stage that you're in right now as well.
Yeah, that's true. And actually, as you said that, I thought, well, how does Chiron in Leo affect me now? Like, how does it show up for me now? And I think for me now, it's more in a sense of something that I've said all my life, actually. And it's periods of my life, and it's like heightened stress, or like I'm transitioning through something, is I don't want to be seen. I don't want to be perceived. I just want to disappear. And that is so Chiron in Leo, of just like, just don't look at me.
Don't perceive me. The
Yeah,
wound of being perceived. Oh, sorry. No. Yeah.
it's literally that wound of being perceived. And it's not necessarily about always about my physical presentation.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, like for example, this long stint of being off of social media, I
Mm-hmm.
don't want to be perceived, but it's more because of an internal realignment and reassessment of my values. Again, my
Mm-hmm.
heart-led values.
Oh, and
Rather,
sorry,
yeah,
I'm so sorry, but I just like, your charts are lighting off in my head, and I'm thinking about your values, Venus and Aquarius, and I'm like, bing, bing, bing. But I
yeah.
also, like, as you were speaking, I wanted to ask, with your ascendant being in Leo, how do these energies collide for you? Because again, I like to think of the ascendant as the entrance part of our storybook. Like we're living through different chapters of our storybook here. And with the first house being that entry point, which again is how we are perceived about with the world around us, but by the world around us, should I say, how we are perceived by the world around us. And with that wound of also being perceived, Chiron and Leo, being in the same house where your ascendant is that entry point where, and I do think it is expressive energy. As you mentioned, it's about the heart space, the solar space, but also the vocal, the expression part of your world and the world around you. So how do those energies collide, and do they conflict? Or is there some sort of like, because it's in the same sign and same house, is there some sort of supportive energy that your ascendant can give to your Chiron placement in times where it's heightened or like it's under strain and pressure?
That's a really good question, because I think if I feel that Chiron flare
Mm-hmm.
up in terms of the wound, I feel like now I try to find another outlet or another point of expression. But that's taken me a long time to kind of understand that. However, when you were saying that first entry point, because that's literally what the ascendant is,
Yes.
I I can't speak about that without acknowledging our origin now. And I feel like for a lot of us, and maybe someone's going to disagree with me, that's cool. But I feel like a lot of us develop or receive or incarnate with our wound, our Chiron wound, from our paternal or ancestral
Mm-hmm.
lineage or connection or disconnection. So again, I'll come on to this a little bit later. There's a lot of my Chiron in Leo story that I can trace back to the relationship with my mother. And word
Mm-hmm.
for word, like some of the things that I will say, I can see that that was either said to me or I was made to feel that that wasn't important enough. So I feel that now I'm not important enough in that specific area. So again, because even though there is a degree, oh, well, not a degree, there is quite a lot of degree separating my Chiron and my ascendant.
Yes.
There is still that influence of how it started, where it originated from, and how it manifests or shows up in my existence.
I like what you said. How it started, where it originates from, and how it shows up in your existence. And also, because of the degrees and separation between your Chiron placement and your ascendant, do you feel that that's also giving you the chance to actually work through that wound, the perception of being, the wounding around perception and being seen and visibility as well, because of the separate? Yeah.
Well, do you know what? I actually think it kind of presents as an extreme.
Mm-hmm.
So moments where I'm like, yeah, fuck it and fuck everyone. I'm going to be seen. I'm going to be heard. And
Yeah.
who gives a shit? And I just don't care
Mm-hmm.
about being my true authentic self. But then there are extreme moments where I'm like, I need to just go into my shell and I don't want to speak to anyone. And
Mm-hmm.
I just don't want to be present with that. So I feel it more in extremes rather than the equilibrium at times.
Okay. So the
Yeah.
flare up is in the, it's either on the Okay, I understand what you mean. So it can be very much real and in your face, or it's not as obvious or like as present in your reality. Yeah.
Yeah. What about for you? Because I don't. How far is your?
Oh gosh, I mean, some astrologers might say the 9 degrees isn't that far of an orbit. So it's literally, yeah, my Chiron placement's at 20 degrees and the ascendant 29. So it's not far apart in that story. But and that's, as you were speaking, I was literally thinking, no, we also have our Chiron placements in the same house as our ascendant. Like, not many, well, okay, I know we haven't seen all the charts in the world, but some people don't have that. And I think that's quite unique as well. And for myself, I think that because of how close it is, I can't separate the two. And I think my flare ups happen, but when it's happening, it's coinciding with the flare ups of my existence in the world too. And
Oh, point.
And I think that also one thing that I've realized is that, you mentioned the roots and the origins of family, the maternal. And I think with Chiron and Virgo, not that this relates to school, but I think about Mercury. And I think Mercury also is about how we communicate with others. I like to think about friendship groups and words. I think words for me, and like when I think about some of the experiences that have made me hate my physical vessel or dislike the way that I look, and I think about, because I love taking pictures. Like, let me just summarize this in short, sweet, simple words. I love taking photos. And there was a time in my life, like I'd say 2012, 2011, around that time frame where I would just take selfies unprovoked. I was young. I loved it. And a friend's friendship group were like, why does she take those photos? And, oh, what does she think of herself? And blah, blah, blah. And those words till date have always stayed with me. And that's why when you spoke about the origins being the family, the roots, the ancestry, I was like, this Chiron and Virgo can also extend to friendship groups, communication groups, where people are using their words or rating things, Mercury's expression to, really have an impact on how that wound flares up. So yeah, very interesting. If people could see Mimi here, she's nodding.
I really feel that, but I was just like, yeah, again, that is such what you were saying about the ingredients, like that reference to the education or school and the people that you're around and the underlying communication.
Yes.
So mercurial. Whereas for me, and again, this is more so specifically about the degree my Chiron's at.
Yeah.
But also the heart being the home. For me, that's how I perceive it. But then, yeah, that detail is so important.
And it really is literally the ingredients in the kitchen. Like, just imagine that you didn't have the tray, you were making lasagna, but you didn't have the tray to put the lasagna in. The ingredient, like, you can't make yes, you can make it in a pot, fine, you can DIY it, but essentially just imagine you're having a dinner party, you're hosting. That is the missing ingredient, the key ingredient. I think all of these things layer up and really assist and help us in understanding our human experience. I would love to know what degree your Chiron placement is at.
So this is new information to me, as in I discovered this year.
Yes.
And when I discovered my degree of my Chiron, I was spinning because I was like, damn, this shit runs really deep within me and within my experience. So my Chiron is 4 degrees, which is a Cancer degree. And my first thoughts when I saw that was my emotions, but also the mother. And I was like, that maternal energy was going to sting me either way I entered my chart. It was always going to catch me.
Oh my God. Yes. I mean, I want to come back to this, but obviously for people who are listening who might be like, oh my gosh, what's the degree theory? What are you guys talking about? So the theory of degrees was essentially formulated or researched by Nikola, I'm going to just try and pronounce his name correctly. If I butcher, I'm sorry, Stojanovic. And he is a, renowned astrologer. He was doing a lot of readings, and a lot of client-facing work, and also in contact with professors and academics. And essentially, he found that when he was doing his readings, he almost felt like there was a missing ingredient. Like he was reading charts and he was getting it right, but he felt like just looking at the aspects and the signs and, the houses wasn't essentially getting into the precise details as to some of the experiences we might encounter throughout life. And through his research, through I think also using his intuition, because he speaks about that quite a bit in the introduction of his book, he came up with the theory of degrees, and essentially the degrees ranging from, I'm going to go ahead and just make sure that I have. So Aries would be the first degree. So from 1 to literally about 29 degrees are all associated with specific zodiac signs, the characteristics, traits, and qualities. He goes into a bit more research when you read the PDF file or the book as to the specific qualities, for example. But as Mimi mentioned, 4 degrees is typically associated with being a Cancer degree. So is 28 degrees. Aries, which is the first entry point into the zodiac wheel, is associated with the degrees 1, 13, and 25. And he talks about, he lists a range of qualities and I want to say traits, but also descriptive words. So he speaks about engineers, mechanical engineering, construction, flame, red color, the head, being brave, active, and these are all like Martian related qualities. And he essentially basically said that these, allowing us to observe the chart through the lens of the degree theories, also provides an extra level of precision and accuracy when delivering readings to clients or just even looking at your own personal life story. And, with Mimi's being at 4 degrees, it really does speak to the home. I mean, I want to go and read what it says for Cancer, 4 degrees. And let's see, I'll briefly do so. So, for Cancer, it speaks about women, mother, by the mother, public opinion, general opinion, a house, a home, a flat, entrance to a flat. It speaks about a man, people, human race, nations, a national of origin, the homeland. And, as you spoke about, the mother, the roots, the ancestry, and that linking to your Chiron and Leo, outside of Leo, being the heart expression, that 4 degrees really does apply that little cherry on the top, the icing on the layer of the cake. And I think for myself, with mine being at 20 degrees, which is associated with the Scorpio degree, the Scorpionic degree, I really, as Mimi mentioned, my mind was boggled. I was like, oh, damn, no wonder these things sting hard. No wonder these experiences becoming hard, because, again, I have the ascendant at 29, which is like the Leo expression, right? And then shortly after, or before it, should I say, I have this Scorpionic degree that sits quite closely to it. And I'm just going to read the description about it, or what it says about the 20 degrees. But, oh gosh, it says, at the risk of one's life, someone who died or will die during our lifetime, great. Not that that's going to happen to me. Litter, trash, rubbish, garbage men, dustbin, trash. Operation, a surgeon, surgery, operating room. A grave corpse, a skeleton. A vicinity of the underworld ground, and the vicinity of a cemetery. So a lot of it is speaking to the nitty-gritty stuff, the side of life that might be considered dark, or I want to say doom and gloom, but it requires you to visit the parts of your soul that you might not be ready or want to journey or venture down. But I find it quite interesting that we have water degrees in these Chiron placements for the both of us. So I think, us sharing our experiences on this is because we also have had the physical journey through. We are skilled with the hands. As I mentioned, the translation from the Greek word Chiron to Chiron literally means skilled with hands. Hand surgeon, using your hands to really acquire life experiences. And I think that's quite evident in what you are saying with your specific Chiron placement and the sign and the, the degree, and also with mine. So I think we've touched on the flaring. But yeah, I will briefly just say for myself, it really comes up when I'm in public. There was a time when Instagram was just new and out there in 2012. For a very long time, I struggled to read the explore page or look at the explore page. I intentionally would skip that because that would heighten the sense of inadequacy that I'd feel. Like, of course, I love beautiful girls. I'm a girl, but that would heighten the insecurity that was already within. I had a deep disdain for how I physically looked. Like, I also would see things that other people wouldn't see within my own, my own appearance, but also in the ways in which I viewed my intellect and the ways I viewed myself. So I think those flare-ups would happen internally, but also externally.
Just going back to yours being at a Scorpio degree, and when you were saying about, communication, the things that people have said to you kind of really staying with you.
Yeah.
Just theorizing, is it possible that, again, that scorpionic degree, is it possible that sometimes people have said things to you because they have been rooted in envy or jealousy?
Oh,
and then stayed with you, but then that Chiron has like internalized it as your own.
Oh, yes. And I think, it's very specific how you've mentioned rooted in jealousy and envy, because that's also one of my blind types where I don't see that. And I think
the chills.
For a very long time, like my sister will say to you, like, I don't see that. And I think that's also one of the reasons why when people are saying words, it's like, but why would you say those words? A, because they stay with me for life, like they stay deep down. I think my psyche absorbs the words and they sting, like literally stinging nettles, far greater than people might even acknowledge on the exterior, because I guess I don't really necessarily showcase as such. But as Mimi has been speaking about, I've been, sharing my thoughts on Medium, and I really have been opening up my portal with pain, should I say. But I think, yes, those words, they run deep. Like, I think if you want to get to me, you're going to get to me by words. And it's crazy because I also consider myself to be a wordsmith too, with all that Mercurial energy going on in my chart. But when the stinging nettles and the scorpion stingray sting me, like those words, they are deeply ingrained into my psyche. And sometimes I do take them on, and they can form parts of the ways that I view myself in the world, or parts of the ways that I identify with those words. They become some of my realities at times. And I think I've had to do a lot of unworking and unraveling, and going back to past memories that I had forgotten about to release those words that aren't mine. And as you said, because they've been rooted in jealousy and envy, at the time in my life, I think for a lot of my childhood, teenage years, I didn't see like, oh, this person might be jealous of me. Like, I just thought that we all got along, and I had this very utopian way of viewing like connections and people. And it was only until, as I always say, 2022 really changed my psyche, and like the ways in which I viewed the world. I was like, oh damn, like this is really how the world really is. So yeah, I would 100% say that has been the reality and experience for myself.
Thank you for sharing that. And yeah, I had to kind of just get that out of my mind.
No, I'm glad that you did. And I'm very happy that you use those precise words, because it's not like we've been speaking about jealousy or envy, but that has like, you literally hit the nail on the head with that. Very interesting. Mimi's spidey senses are out today. But I would love to know, have you mastered Chiron yet? Or are there things that you actively have been working on to heal the wounding that is associated with your specific placement in the first house?
No, I've not mastered Chiron yet. I think it will be a lifelong journey. And there are definitely things that I actively do, but I'm kind of thinking of it twofold, because a conversation that I had recently was about my raw expression and how sometimes that is hidden and it's not always visible, like the rawness of my emotions. And so I have taken it upon myself to express that more with particular individuals, and I'm being very intentional in doing so. And that, I feel like, is a way of me actively working on it. It's also about mm, revising relationships, interactions that are linked to the origin of my chironic story or journey.
Mm.
So really being aware that just because that was the origin, it doesn't mean that it has to come through and follow through with me, as in the relationships or friendships or familial connections. Just because it was there at the start, it doesn't mean that it has to continue with me. So basically, get out my fucking car because you ain't coming with.
Do you know, as you were speaking, I have so like, I don't know if I need to write these things down, but the first thing you spoke about raw expression, and that, you know, sometimes, you know, in the conversations that you have been having that might feel inhibited at times. And I want to first ask, with your, obviously, I think you've shared this before, that you have a Capricorn moon.
Mm,
And with your Chiron being in a, you know, a Cancer degree, right, at 4 degrees, although it's still stationed in Leo, do you feel that sometimes the moon inhibits that raw expression? And also the moon linking to the maternal, which is again the origin stories in which you developed your Chiron story from. Do you feel that that plays a role in how that raw expression is expressed externally? Yeah, and internally.
100%. And that the conversation, the person who I had this conversation with, how I kind of responded in that conversation was, well, actually, I need to feel safe
Mm-hmm.
in order for me to have that raw expression. And I feel like that was definitely my moon speaking
Yeah.
about where's my safe container for these emotions to come out, because otherwise where they're going type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's 100% my moon. And I feel like it's a tricky one to balance, I think, at times, because it's not a lack or a loss of emotion. In fact, I have the opposite, where it's an abundance of emotion, like it's an overpouring of emotion.
Mm-hmm.
And how that conversation then manifested was me crying and having this expression of my Chiron, and my moon was like, whoa, what are you doing? But it had to come out. But
Yeah.
again, I think that safety element was, it needed to be expressed in order for me to feel a semblance of that. I don't know if that answers the question.
No, it does. It does answer the question. And I think you mentioned the word safety, feeling safe. And although I know that that is an earth sign, your moon, Cap moon, is rooted in the soil, in the earth, you know, it feels safe with the earth. I think it's also quite interesting how that links into your Chiron story and the expression of Leo. And that's why I say the zodiac signs, although, you know, in pop astrology, they're used for an array of things, but I really think that they help to understand the expressions of how certain placements, aspects, asteroids, comets, whatever the case might be, might shape your external and internal world. And I think also one thing I realized, so as you were speaking, right, and speaking also about the origins of your Chiron story, linking to the maternal, and you know, quite similar to Chiron, he essentially learnt what he had to learn through the abandonment that he experienced. He really poured his heart, soul into learning the healing arts, prophecy, music, and all the things that are skilled with the knowledge and insights that he was able to then pour into others. And I also see a similar story with yourself when, you know, although I followed you, I think it was in 2024, but I know prior to that, you were really heavy and active on sharing your maternal wounds and the journey that you've had to go through. And I think I see the similarities, you know, although we hear this archetype of Chiron being the wounded healer, I see that you had to go through those stages with the maternal in your origin story for you to really empower, because you developed a community, you were able to build a community, but you was also able to guide and shape the ways in which people go through their own personal journeys with maternal wounding. And I see the similarities with Chiron and your story, and how that knowledge and wisdom, although it is a pain that still is persistent, and you know, it's not something, you are acknowledging that it hasn't just gone away in a blink of other eyelid. Like, no, the Chiron still exists in our daily lives, but it's something that you're here to also help and usher other people through. And I think that's the beauty of the antidote. And I think through that, I want to also ask, do you also gain healing through healing others?
100%.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, like 100%, because like I can't say it enough, because like I often think back to when I went back to my business.
Yeah.
That was, I think my son was 2, 3 months old, and people were like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "I need to be back. Like that is my number one, my first baby, not my number one,
Mhm.
but that was the first baby." And for me, I do it because it's in the healing work. I do it because I receive so much from doing it. And I also learn so much from the people that I get to sit with.
Mhm.
And like for me, it's a privilege to share energy, and I don't take that for granted. So people might have an exchange or thank me, but I'm like, you have no idea what this is doing for my soul. Like this for me is like the biggest remedy of healing. And
Yeah.
until I'm in my grave, I'm not stopping. So that's
Yes. Yes.
definitely
No, yeah. And I see, as you were explaining this, as I asked you whether you've mastered it or yet, and if you're actively working on this, I was just taken back to Chiron's story. And I think, yeah, you really embody that in what you do. So, and I think, go ahead, sorry.
no, I was just going to say, it's funny because yes, but I see it in you, but in a more mercurial way, like
Yes.
through your work, through your
Hmm.
expression, through some of the music that you listen to, through the arts that you really observe. And
Yeah.
I, again, that was part of like the healing with the hands, wasn't it?
Yes.
It's like that healing ability can span across so many different physical forms as well.
Hmm.
And just as you were saying that, I was like, yeah, but I see that in you, but just in a slightly different way.
Yes. And I think
That,
that's no,
yeah, you
yeah,
gonna say what I'm saying?
beauty of the expressions are different, and that's why I'm like, if you ever get a chance to really, and I always say this in Kirsty's episode, one thing that she mentioned was just that you never really stop studying. And I think once you step out the lens of like what's going on, the noise, because I think there can be a lot of noise in the astro community at times, but once you actually step outside the noise and you find ways that you can study the text or study your signs and all the things that you might be gravitating towards on your own terms, there's so much beauty in understanding the beauty of perspective. Because like Mimi said, for myself, when you said no, I laughed out loud because it's like I resonate. I have not mastered that rune yet. However, I realized that journaling for me, using Mercury's gifts and tools, has really been empowering and essential in, the skilled hands that, Chiron comes with, but also healing and working within my own heart space. And as I mentioned, words, lyrics, writing, things to do with, I'm going to say words again, really, really have an impact on my soul. And I think, I think back to you mentioning music. I might be going through the motions. Let me just put it as politely as that. But music will find, and the lyrics is not, and even the instrumentals, certain melodies and the frequencies really have the impact to shape my heart space. And I think for myself, I've not mastered it. I don't have all the tools under the box, but I realize that working with the particular signs and the qualities and the superpowers that are associated with the sign that rules your natal Chiron placement can help you soothe the internal world and also the external world. Because I think when we work within, we also are shifting what's externally around us. And I think with my acceptance of the body, I realized that there are going to be moments where I don't like how I look. There are going to be moments where I can look into the camera and I'm going to hear those intrusive thoughts, but I need to sit and realize and understand that those things are in passing. Like they aren't my present and exact reality. Like, yes, they're happening, they're real, but these are not things that shape and define me on a daily basis. And I think, as you've mentioned, words, music, I speaking about pain, and I hate sometimes it's also down. I want to say it's what's the word? It's looked down upon, like when you identify with pain. But I literally think in my storybook that I'm here to share with the world, that's part of some of the things I'm here to do. So, you have to find what you're comfortable with, but also understand that people's perceptions of how you deal and heal Chiron, how you work with Chiron with your hands, is how you do it for your personal journey. And it might look different from other people. So, yeah, I'm going to summarize that. Yeah.
Question for you on that though, because one of the things that you said obviously is journaling or writing,
Mm-hmm.
but it's from that place of pain.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something that we obviously connect on. But I don't know if this is a thought. I don't know if you realize, like, when you do write, like, how palpable it is, but how, like, palpable that feeling of healing through your writing is. Like, you can just, like, feel it so, like, it's just so deep, that feeling. And I really, like, admire that. I've said to you, you
Yeah.
are one of my favorite writers, for real, because of that space that
Yeah.
you work from. But I guess I want to ask you, because it is such a present way of healing for you,
Mm-hmm.
do you, when you're writing specifically on your platforms,
Yeah.
do you write and release in real time? So, like, are things going on in present, then you write and release in real time? Or is it part of your healing process to kind of stagger it? Yeah, this is just
Yeah.
curiosity about how the world gets to digest it.
Yeah. Do you know what I would love? I'm actually going to say that I think it's a mixed blend approach. There are
Mm.
times, there are some experiences. So, and this is what, thank you for the, you know what, I need to firstly start by saying thank you for the love. And, equally so, when I read your work, when I read the writing, I was like, damn. So there's a mutual admiration going on here, guys. And please check out Mimi's writings because she really be writing from the soul. And I also just want to say that my first ever experience, just like answering the question, it's a mixed blend approach. And I want to say mixed blend because when I was going through an experience that really rocketed and plummeted my existence soul and spiraled me into a different me, I'm going to say, still the same me, but internally my soul changed. That had to happen and I had to pause and wait. And it was the first time I spoke about plutonic synastry. And that really, like, I didn't realize that in that precise moment in time, the world needed to hear that because that was one of my pieces that really took off. And I was like, wait, people want to hear about pain? Like, I didn't ever, like, I wrote that. The experience had happened. It was like 2022, and I think it was like 2023 when I wrote that, but it had been over a scale of period of time. And when I wrote that, I didn't think that that would actually have the impact that it did. However, there are times where I'm in the moment and it's like, this is a release for me. Even when I do wait and pause though, it still is a release because I realized when I wrote that, I could see from the lens of perception, like I could see from the beauty of hindsight. I could take a step back and look at the snapshot of history and time and really see how this connection and soul union really played out through the stars and the astro. But there are moments in time where it's like something's burning in my heart. And I think Saturn in Pisces, one thing I'm going to say, guys, I love to waffle. I'm going to try and summarize this part up. But essentially, one thing Saturn and Pisces has been bringing to my heart is poetry. And I feel that that's not, I don't want to say I never identified as a poet, but I really loved reading and studying poetry, but I wouldn't ever call myself a poet. But I think under this transit, I really, like, there've been times where I felt immense heaviness and pain and like falling and like sharing and pouring the inner contents of my heart through poetry, through the prose and like writing short form content has really helped heal and release. So yeah, I'm going to say it's been a mixture of both. And I think sometimes I write in the present moment and that's releasing. And sometimes I can write in hindsight and look back and that's also still releasing for me. Yeah.
Thank you. So we have spoken about Chiron in the first house. Now, directly opposite the first house is the seventh house. And every house will have an opposite end. I just want to say that. But what I forgot to mention right at the start is we are looking at the axis of the chart, and I kind of see like the first, seventh, fourth, 10th. We've mentioned this before as anchors of the chart.
Yes.
Now, when we shimmy over to the seventh house, that is one. It's 1+1. I plus we. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it makes sense.
It's you and another person. Now, I want to kind of preface this by saying, I think we easily fall into this is a relationship house, and we then think it's like our romantic relationships. But I want to really, really say this is a relational house, how we relate to anyone. That could be your family, your friends, your colleagues, your relationships, anyone that you have a contractual agreement with in spirit. So I know that there's obviously houses for friendships, houses for work, but I do think when we're thinking about the way that we relate to one another, seventh house can give us a bit of info as well. So just on that, Emily and I both have our Saturn in the seventh house. Now, I gotta give a bit of love to Saturn because I feel like Saturn gets such a bad rep. And I do fly the flag for Saturn. And obviously I have bias because I have a Capricorn and Aqua stellium. But Saturn is that authoritarian. It is legacy. It's how we build discipline, often called the taskmaster. Now, when we think about the taskmaster, it's going to put you through the ringer. It's going to put you through your paces and literally forge you through fire, effectively. So it's like an unavoidable portal of experiences, lessons to try and build you, to try and shape you into that legacy maker is how I view Saturn. Now, a word that I really, really like that I don't see often, correct me if I'm wrong, with Saturn is consolidation. Like the way that we like come together with everything that we've acquired and just consolidate that knowledge or experience or skill set, whatever it is. So I really feel like Saturn has the ability to teach you things, but also guide you to consolidate everything that you have built. I always say when it comes to Saturn, you kind of have to surrender to Saturn, because if you hold on, and Saturn does relate to control, if you hold on too much in terms of trying to grasp for control when it comes to Saturn, I feel like you lose the beautiful things that it is trying to like gift you in a way. So I feel like sometimes, although Saturn is related to control, as I mentioned, releasing fear when it comes to Saturn is quite important for a smoother kind of journey. But Saturn does also rule or indicate fear as well.
No, I love consolidation, gifting you, and also surrendering to the control, because I think, as you said, I'm also sometimes guilty of this, but as you're speaking about this, I'm realizing that no, we actually are being gifted. It's just obviously might not be in the ways that we desire or we like, but there's a consolidation, there's like consecration that's happening. Something solid and formable is happening. And I love how you said consolidation, and I love how you said gifting, because the gifts and rewards do come along. So yeah, I just had to say that. Sorry.
Eventually they come along, and I think that's the other thing with Saturn, is that we don't know when the gifts are going to come, and sometimes there might be a delay, or what we perceive to be a delay when it comes to Saturn. Like that's just, unfortunately, like I can't sugarcoat that part. Saturn does have an effect on time and the way that we then receive things, or even the way that we perceive time in this realm. I mentioned at the top of this episode about Saturn being that mirror. And why I think Saturn is a mirror is because it forces you to view your shadow self. And by shadow, I mean the things that aren't so visible in your day-to-day experiences, even to your own self, unless you are really kind of doing deep introspective work or really sitting with your ego effectively. And that shadow self can cause some sort of separation if you're not working to kind of align it, or it can cause fragmentation of the soul. But again, that's to rebuild you and to like really give birth, or allow you to give birth to your soul self, is how I view it. So, as I said, we both have Saturn in the 7th house, and I have mine in Aquarius. Emily, where do you have yours?
Mine's in Pisces.
Pisces. So for me, I do have other planets sitting there, and quite crucial planets, I would say, sitting there. And for me, I find this quite tough because my other planets in Aquarius give this openness to just experiencing one-to-one relationships, contracts, in quite a liberating way, in quite a free way. There's no sense of possessiveness that I experience. It's just very expansive, the way that I experience my other placements in Aquarius. But what I do find is that with Saturn there, I can sometimes feel, this is just me, I can sometimes feel suffocated by partnerships. And I can sometimes feel like a loss, or the fear of a loss of my own independence. And I find that quite hard to balance against. So I have my Lilith, my Venus, my Mars there as well. All, I think, quite crucial in terms of how we relate to people. But sometimes I can feel Saturn gives me a lot of lessons when it comes to one-to-one partnerships. And the lessons are always about my freedom, my sense of freedom, but also my sense of, can I feel free whilst being in union? Doesn't matter the type of connection. And again, I must stress that, but also, how do we feel free together? How do we create something that feels freeing or healing together? So there's always this kind of tightrope that I kind of have. I feel like I'm walking a tightrope when it comes to these connections, because there's just this desire to feel close, but a desire to also detach. And that closeness, I feel like, comes from other aspects, of course, but also the detached element. And sometimes I don't like the word detached when it comes to Aquarian energy, because again, there is an abundance of experience and emotion, but detached in a sense of, we are still individuals, but how can we build wider than 1+2? So how can we build a unit, a family unit? How can we build a community? How can we build a whole, like, what's the word? I'm thinking of commune.
No, community, literally what you said. I think literally that is the embodiment. Community, yeah. And
yeah.
wow, yeah, sorry, I'm gonna let you finish.
But I guess, like, through Saturn being there, I feel like I've had a lot of relational challenges when it comes to those themes that I've mentioned, but I actually more so experience it in, like, friendships, relationships, yes, but let me park that for a minute. I find that, or I have found, because this isn't present for anyone who's listening, who's my friend, love you. It's taken me a while to find friends that feel like family and that we have shared values or we have a shared outlook or ethos on life. Whereas growing up through my, especially like my teens and then uni stages, I really struggled with that. And
Mm.
then I felt so othered and I felt so alien because I had visions that just wasn't aligned to their vision. And how this also showed up was me being spiritual versus my friends being religious. And that was just a source of like, it felt just completely incompatible. And I know people have that in terms of their experiences, that they can be spiritual and have religious friends or vice versa. But for me, it created way too much friction to the point where we literally could not see each other. And I feel like that's that Aquarian energy creating that restriction alongside Saturn. So it's taken me a while to get there. But I also think, in relationships, as in like interpersonal, one-to-one romantic relationships, I'm not going to say it's caused delays, but it's caused, I don't know what the word is.
Refinement, I think.
Thank you. Refinement. And I don't know if I'm there yet, obviously. I think I'll only be able to tell you I'm there at the end of my life because honestly, because I feel like I will always have some sort of growth to go through with Saturn
Yeah.
sitting. But that's me. How about you?
You blew me away. Like, please, I was just thinking, thoughts, please do not disappear, do not disappear. Like, I don't know if you've watched Inside Out when there's all these little things in the girl's mind. But essentially, when you said suffocate, I was like, damn, because Saturn in Aquarius is an air sign, right? And that is to do with the air around us. Even oxygen, it is, fast moving. And I also think, in contrast, my Saturn in Pisces feels drowning. Like, I feel like sometimes I'm drowning in the
Oh,
overwhelm. And as you were speaking, that compare and contrast really sat with my soul. Like, you did something visually. I was just taken straight to the elements. And this is why it's important to also consider the elements in your analysis. But I think one thing that you mentioned, when you spoke about the isolation, I know sometimes people talk about, the black sheep, but I think you being that person who had the differing opinions, when it came to spirituality, for example, your beliefs, Lilith in Aquarius, that's speaking out quite loud, Mars in Aquarius and Venus in Aquarius. I think that it also took me back to the upbringing, the environment, the type of people that, I'm talking about skin color, class, race that you were surrounded around. And I think having those placements can cause some form of isolation, othering, exclusion to some extent as well, especially when they're in, and how you mentioned it's a relational house. This is not just the relationships of, one-to-one booth things and situationships. No, we're talking about all connections, all kinds of connections that you see from all different walks of life, centering in that seventh house. And I saw that, like, as you were speaking, I couldn't help but think about the experiences that you've shared around, like, I think it's high school, maybe, being in a particular area, being different, but then also you sharing that, in university, I think it was, when you started to express your spiritual beliefs, there was some sort of, like, I want to say collision that occurred, because like you were on two different paths and the paths were like separating out to the point where you physically couldn't coincide and be, meet up with these people. And I think when you have such placements in the intimate areas of your chart, as you mentioned, it's the anchor. These are your angles. These really shape your outer world, but also your internal world. I also was thinking about, my descendant, my vertex. I was thinking about my Saturn placement, which are all in the seventh house. And I think these are very intimate parts of the chart too. And as you were speaking about, yourself, when you really had to figure out that at what cost does the discomfort come at? At what cost? Because you mentioned detachment, and it's not necessarily detachment or being aloof, but it's more so understanding that this is not the experience for me. And whilst you are community based and orientated, I think it's taken, as I said, refinement, that process of refining who your tribe is, who are those people who are your go to people, who you share ideals, values, and belief systems that align. And even if they aren't exactly the same, there is room for pluralism. There is room for you to still have your view, hold your perception, but they're not outcasting you for what you feel, believe, or think about. And I think Aquarius is ruled by, the intellect, it's the mind. I do see it as innovation as well. And I think that's quite interesting that, spiritual beliefs, which I really think is Lilith and Aquarius screaming out very loud, coming into that foreground and being that source of opposition, but also your entry point is to how you share your expression and your story with the world around you. And you mentioned Saturn consolidating it. It has been a process of refinement. In me knowing you for the short space of time that I've known you, I do feel that you are going through the refinement. You have been refining those areas of your life that are aqua ruled, but balancing that also with, the Leo side of your chart. And I think about, taking myself, for example, having that Virgo Pisces, weighing scale happening there. I think one thing for me, which I've had to, I think Saturn is here to teach me post Saturn return. I mean, I think when Saturn was in Aquarius, I was starting to learn this, but really the epiphany started to bing, bing, bing out when, Saturn moved back into its natal home for me. And with Saturn and Pisces, I think there's a tendency to overextend oneself through the form of empathy, through the form of like charitable things. And this isn't necessarily like me talking about going to fundraiser stuff, but extending extending my internal world, my warmth, my emotions, my capacity to hold. I'm reading a book at the moment which talks about spirits come from water, and water had so much memory. And when we're holding space for all of these different things in our interpersonal connections, but also just the soul unions we have with other people around us, it really can start to grate on your emotional, physical, and mental health. And I think Saturn and Pisces has really come to like refine the process of you need to get it in together with some sort of boundaries here, because you cannot be a savior to everybody. And that's the Virgo Pisces axis that I find I battle with a lot, because I love to help, I love to be of service, but at what cost does service cost me? And those are the questions of the weighing scales between the first house and the seventh house that I've gone through, but more so Saturn sitting and being in that return position for me as well. And I like to think about the descendant as like, that's who I really am. That's when I lay my soul bare. It's the intimate parts of me of like, all right, in a heartbeat, I'm going to do that for you. And I think Saturn has come in to say, like, yes, you can do it in a heartbeat, but select the people that you're doing it in a heartbeat for. Refine that process. Like, and I know old me would feel like, but no, I feel bad. And, I still feel bad at sometimes, and I still have those moments where I want to still do, but over giving to the extent where you don't even have to give yourself anymore. No, consolidating, as you mentioned. Saturn in Pisces is asking me those questions. And I think one thing I've had to realize in writing about Saturn, in writing about Neptune, I've realized that these planets do reward us, but they require us to, as you mentioned, surrender. Now, I might not know how to do that entirely because I like to control the processes around me. Again, with those the cluster of energy with my Mars, Chiron, ascendant being in Virgo, and then colliding with, Saturn, vertex, and descendant being in Pisces. I've really had to learn the gift, and I've been placed in a point. You know how you mentioned Capricorn needs to feel safe in a box when you spoke about your Capricorn moon? I feel like Saturn and Pisces, I'm on a beach, but I'm surrounded by a box, which is like, no, control your processes we're going to put you in a box, should I say? It's not that things aren't happening for you around the process or around you, but we need you to stay still and stand still whilst we test your faith, whilst we test whether you can see even when you physically can't see, should I say, whether you can't see what's happening in the ethers, in the spiritual world. And I wasn't somebody who I grew up going to church, but I wasn't somebody who, like, as I speak about not accepting my own self, my body, my mind, my nervous system, and my thoughts, I also would talk down on, like, oh, I don't think this is going to happen. I'd be very negative, actually. Let me just put it as that. Very self-doubting, negative in the ways I speak to myself. And I think Saturn in Pisces has really come in to say, you need to have a relationship with a belief system. You need to believe that things can happen. Even, and as Mimi said, Saturn can take time. My sun is at 22 degrees. I know there's delays in detours. And I speak about that. I write about that quite a lot in my expression about the detours in life. But I know ultimately there are going to be fruits and rewards for the labor and the effort and the time that I'm putting in. But the physical work has been required. And it's not enough for me. Saturn and Pisces has taught me it's not enough for me to just have wishful thinking. I need to ground myself in some sort of reality. Although I can wish and have desires and dreams and hopes, how am I in my physical reality consecrating and consolidating those desires? So I hope that has answered your question. I feel like I've answered everything in one thing, but
Well, yeah, all the notes, all the thoughts, because that faith and belief part for Saturn, Saturn in Pisces for you is so real, and how you've been tested on that, and you've really had to kind of find where home is for you in relation to faith and seeing and trusting in the things that you cannot see, whilst also making steps in the things that you can see. Which again, when we think about that, that axis, Virgo being that earth, that practical, grounded thing, action or reality, and then the opposite end being your Pisces of being that kind of in the depths of the water. I just kept feeling that that opposition as you were speaking, and yeah, it's just been massive for you. But I also have my Saturn Aquarius at a Pisces degree, so mine's a 12 degree. So I relate so much to what you were saying, especially that having to go on a journey of how much am I overgiving? Who am I giving to? And like, not necessarily why, but how is this serving me? I think is how you kind of put it. And for me, I've had moments in my life, and this is going to turn into a question to you, where I've had encounters. I think I might have said this to you before, where I'll have encounters, and these are more speaking in a relational, one-to-one relationships, intimate relationships. And I've kind of thought to myself, was I just there to be of service to them, in spiritual service to them? Like, and I used to say in frustration, why don't I get to keep a relationship and it nourish and serve me? Why is it that I'm always being the one dragging someone through life lessons and not even meaning to, not being like explicit about it, but the very presence of me awakening something in someone else, them going through their ish, me holding that emotional space for them, and then them being recycled into their own journey without me, and that being so difficult to sit with, really and truly. So my question to you, do you ever feel, or have you ever felt with that Pisces energy, but that Saturn in the 7th, that your relationships have been unequal or inequitable, but where you have had to step up and be the role of the teacher or guide?
So I'm going to answer. Yeah, I'm going to answer. But everything that you said, I'm like, yes. Like, you have really summed this to the core. And I want to start with the very fact that your Saturn placement being at 12 degrees, which is a Pisces degree, and mine at 24 degrees is so cool. I think that's so cool. Like, how weird is that? the little signs are signing, guys. And secondly, I would like to say, yes, I wholeheartedly have seen, felt, experienced, dreamt, and I think one of the I want to say one of the I don't know if this is a thing with the placement, but I think it's my experience. I want to say dream about it as well, but with Saturn and Pisces, I think there's also some sort of inhibition with like our dream world at times. But I have had that. Yeah, I know. Ooh, I have had that feeling that I am the assister role in this person's story. Now, as you mentioned, it's hard to stomach when you have literally held space, held emotion, molded, morphed, transformed into various different other. If you can see me, so she's making me laugh. But if you can see her, how those transformations to assist another through that healing process. And I know by my very existence, as you've mentioned, I know that I transform and speak life into people's realities and experiences. So for myself, I think where the overgiving or overextension comes from the emotion, because as you said, with water, looking at the sign Pisces is it's ruled by water, and water is very fluid. It can influx very quickly when you've got the tides of the waves coming in very quickly and fast. So can my emotions mirror that exact movement. And I can pull very quickly, feel very deeply to the depths of the ocean. And I feel that sometimes, in as much as it's hard to stomach that experience has come to an end and that person is journeying across over to their other experience chapter or storybook, it's also been hard to feel that sometimes that's not, it's been a hard feeling to sit and stomach with, that sometimes that's not been echoed or mirrored back at me. And that's even, yeah, it's caused me to feel angry, pissed off, annoyed, question certain realities, question certain beliefs that I have. Like, why are my guides allowing this? Like, why? And I think it's very easy, and I do get into that mode to ask the whys. But I will say that, yes, there have been experiences. There have been times where I've had to just pause myself. There was a recent time this year where I said, nah, a few times this year, should I say, where I've had to say nah, especially in the romantic field, in the romantic arena, where I think Neptune's blind fogs, for those who obviously use the modern ruler, Neptune's blind fogs can really blind me at times, blindsight me. And these are in connections where I didn't see it coming, like it happened quick. And these are the connections which have catapulted me, but also have really shaped my internal world as to understanding that sometimes this is going to be a storybook that I'm going to have to play out in certain characters' lives, even if it isn't one that I've entirely made peace with, but it's one that I have understood the realizations of. So I don't know if that answers what you have asked. Yeah.
It really, really does. And you don't have to obviously like go into details or share experiences.
Yeah.
But one of the other things, and of course we have the same but different, is that we're both Pisces degrees for our Saturn. Do you feel, or have you had experiences where mental health, either your mental health has been affected, or you've witnessed someone going through mental health episodes or crises?
Mm-hmm.
Have you experienced that, number one, through that seventh house lens, or trauma? Because again, that can be linked to, if you think where Pisces is, it's the 12th house, if we were to kind of plot it on the astro wheel.
Yeah.
And that deals with the psychological. So I just wondered if that also is an influence.
Yes, I would 100% say that typically in the romantic encounters that I've had, connections that I've had, a lot of these people have been journeying through heavier mental, psychological, traumatic events that I have also absorbed. Because again, I think it's a sponge-like experience when you have these particular degrees, signs, or placements in these houses. And I feel that in as much as I have absorbed them, it has been a heavy task. And at the time, I didn't realize that this was healing. Like, don't get me wrong, like there are technical words for what we are doing here, but in the process, I just thought that I was, I was just being me and, holding space. But as I've gone down the journey, the rabbit hole, as you might say, and have understood my purpose, still understanding my purpose here, but in understanding the role and how the ancestors I walk with are here to assist me, I realized, no, I've actually been doing the work of a healer because I've been absorbing on these very, very deep, heavy, very chaotic energies that aren't my own. And I've had to help guide, speak, unpack. Like I've literally sometimes seen visions where it's like, I was instructed to run. I didn't want to do this and I didn't do this and I didn't listen to my guides here. And they're probably looking at me like, hey, but I remember vividly seeing like I needed to make a salt bath for this individual and actually bath them in it. But I was just like, no, I've overextended myself at the expense of what for somebody who's doing X, Y, and Z. And that's when I put the limits there. However, I have seen that these are people that have come into my life and I think also it's quite interesting that you mentioned Pisces ruling the 12th house, and that's the arena of mental imprisonment, but also psychological, physical imprisonment. It's more so the deeper, heavier sides of the psyche that one might encounter within those houses, also showcasing mental illnesses. And I think sometimes some of the people that I have dealt with, I've met them in a time in their lives where they are dealing or going through things. And I think that should also automatically be like, hello, red flags, like, what are you doing? But I've gone into savior and like fixing mode very quickly, which is that Virgo, like solutions, pragmaticness. How can I fix, help, whatever? But then also there is that divinity side that's weighed up with the Pisces 7th house that's coming in to say, how can I assist you with my ethereal gifts? How can I speak life into you? I'm the type of person that if I know you like a certain song, I'm going to send it to you. I'm going to make a play, like all of these other things to assist your process in healing. So I would love to know if the same is true for you too.
Oh, when you said, how can I assist you with my ethereal gifts? That is so real. Like you giving the language to that in that way, because I think it can be such a subconscious process that degree can do it at, but you again must feel it doubly, twofold. Your Saturn is in Pisces, and I obviously have other Pisces placements, but that word absorbed is so real, because I think again, if you aren't conscious and aware with how Saturn can show up in that 7th house, you unknowingly take on stuff, or can unknowingly take on stuff from those one-to-one contracts. But again, specifically the Pisces aspect absorbs it and then tries to transmute it themselves, which then leaves you feeling more depleted rather than having the boundary of, I'm giving it back to you. Boundary being that Saturn piece. So yeah, sorry, I don't know. I can't remember what your question was.
No, like my question was just that, have you also encountered individuals in your one-to-one romantic connections that have been journey? Have you met them in a space? Has it always been that they've been fine and soothsaying, or have they actually been going through hard times and when your entry point into the connection happened to collide?
I don't want to get into trouble, but yes, I've met people at very challenging stages of their lives, and sometimes it's been they've not realized that they've been at a very challenging time in their life, and the process of proximity has stirred that up, and then everything comes out. So yes, I've definitely been there.
And one thing that you said, like, you know what? I think if we change the language as to how, yes, you mentioned, I love the history that you gave around Saturn, and I love the descriptive words that you also used. But I think in wider discourse, if we change the language and the wording and actually reframed it as a safeguarding tool, This is
Oof.
a buffer, a safeguarding tool, which does not come without painful lessons or hardship. That we acknowledge, and we can never glamorize these things. However, I think one thing that, throughout this conversation that we've been having, one thing that I have realized is that no, I've had to sit with okay, you know what, this person is going through their own individual experience, but that's not for me to absorb and take on as my own, now that's my feeling and that's how I'm feeling, because it's very easy for me to get into that space. And sometimes I've had to advocate for myself and say, okay, you know what, I can see that you're going through that and that's what you are journeying through. Whilst it's in my natural nature to want to help and fix, I'm like, that's not how I want to feel though, because you are going through that. And it's the separation, the safeguarding, separation and identification of what's mine and what's yours. And I know, with Saturn and Aquarius also, I want to ask, just before we go back to the overall discussion, because there is that, I want to say it's a need in our society for community. And I think that's what Saturn and Aquarius peeps are here to do, to establish community within society, to heal through commune, right? Do you feel that it's hard sometimes to balance the desire, the want, and the need for community with also separating the heavy emotions that come from having that particular placement at the 12th degree in your 7th house?
Yeah, it can be, because I guess sometimes I might feel that we're all in it together when the reality is we're not all in it together.
Mm-hmm.
And that can really hurt me
Mm-hmm.
when I realize that there's a misalignment of values or a misrepresentation of oneself.
Mm-hmm.
And I take that personally. Like, I can really take it personally when someone says these are their morals or their values, and then they show up in a completely different energy. Like, that to me, like, cuts quite deeply. Again, because that Aquarian energy is like, but we have this like shared goal and value, and of course we're going to come together, and of course we're going to be one. And when that reality is like dismantled, that's just, it's like really heavy. So for sure.
And one final question before I pass on the baton back to you. In having those realizations and understanding that process, has it then been a challenge for you to then separate and acknowledge that, okay, this is the path that I'm willing to go on and this doesn't make me feel good? So basically what I'm trying to say, have there been times in your life post these realizations where you've had to walk away from certain individuals?
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, I've had to walk away, but then it also I will walk away at the very last minute rather than when I might have sensed it. Which again, I think kind of that is the bit of that Saturn with that Pisces degree, that keeping oneself in that illusion rather than actually acting. But also the Aquarius energy then causes me to isolate, not even retreat, isolate, because it's like, well, I'm just going to go to the opposite end of the spectrum of community and I'm just going to be by myself. So it can happen in quite a very drastic way, for sure.
No, I'm at the opposite end of community. I'm like, we're big on community, but I think hearing you say the opposite end, and then I'm pausing and realizing that isolation, baby, that means isolation. And then also, one thing that we have spoken about is that we both don't know. Well, I guess I can say this, but from hearing what you've just mentioned, we don't let go until it's at the final endpoint. And that's something we've spoken about. Like, I don't know how to do that, guys. And that could be, abandonment wounds, that could be a whole range of things, childhood trauma, but I just don't know. Like, the going gets tough and the tough gets going, and I still will be holding on. And I there's also, as you mentioned, it's the illusion sometimes as well, the fantasy. With Jupiter and Neptune ruling this energy, there is the potential to have those illusions. So let me just summarize that, and thank you so much for answering that.
No, that's okay. I just wanted to just go back slightly and just figure out with you, like, what are you, because boundaries sounds like a big thing in terms of being able to understand how much you're overgiving
Mm-hmm.
or overpouring. Are there any other ways in which you're kind of actively working with that seventh house Saturn energy?
I think so. The boundaries part, faith,
Mm.
and understanding that my faith can and will dwindle at times. There's times
Mm.
where it's going to be, I'm faith beyond borders, and there's times where it's like, okay, I don't see a sign, I don't know what's happening, but nothing is happening. And there is the understanding, should I say, that one, actually, okay, let me frame this as quick as I can, not being ashamed or being or carrying shame for having spiritual beliefs that are different from religious beliefs. That's one thing I've had to work through in this cycle, and acknowledging that I have an inclination towards more traditional forms, and more what my people practice and what that looks like for them. Also understanding that there will be times in my journey where it's like I don't have the faith to move forward. I don't have the tools. I can't utilize. I think we spoke about this in understanding the timing of your life, where it's like, I can't even be bothered to light a candle or use any salt baths. Like, I don't have the capacity. And understanding that, because I think there is a tendency sometimes with my Virgo placements or the energy with the Virgo house, that's the first house for me, wanting to push, 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 even when I can't push anymore. And I think that's my Mars sometimes. Like, I'm still going to do it even if I'm drained, even if I'm tired, even if I'm maxed out. I'm going to just try and push through. And then I've had to realize that rest is part of the process. And right
Yes.
now I am going through a process where I'm in the waiting games. Let me title it as that. And I am not on a traditional path as such. Even with the creative endeavors that I like to pursue and, dabble into. And I think having to go through this period of waiting as well, I've had to sit with discomfort. And I think it's being open about that. I'm not really great. And I think that's the downside of Saturn and Pisces. It's that, and I guess with the first house in Virgo too, I don't necessarily know how to vocalize when I'm going through a hard time as such. But you're going to see me in person, but I will be withering inside. But you might not just know that unless you are sensing or feeling that. And I think sometimes I've had to vocalize and tell people that, no, okay, it's not a good day. And I've had to sit with the very fact that depression is real for me. Like, with Saturn sitting on certain parts of my chart, like my moon, for the on and off for the past year or so, I've really had to sit with the fact that my depressive thoughts are very real and very heavy. Like, this almost feels bordering on like suicidal thoughts because of how dark and intense that feels. And I think I can isolate. I do isolate a lot. And I know for some people it is bad, but that's also my coping mechanism of how I also journey through things, and acknowledging that, you know how you said something one time, I realized that you mentioned that there's this ability to write about an experience, which writing has been the arts. I want to say the arts has been a big thing for me, as part of, leaning more so into that Saturn seventh house energy, but also trying to balance that first polarization between the two houses. The arts has been very healing for me, but also being able to talk about my experiences. I think about Jane Eyre, how she wrote that book under pseudonym, and she wrote her story at a time where, women weren't able to write. And I think about how I'm also able to share some of my experiences, release that, because I struggle with also the the internal releasing of tears as such. Thanks, Saturn and Pisces again. But I find that in writing, but not also sharing too much, but sharing what I need to share, I'm also able to release. But in having conversations, and I think the podcast has formed quite a big part. Like, I think this is also a form of therapy. Like, oftentimes when I come out of our discussions, I'm like, okay, you know what? I am feeling lighter. And although we might not necessarily view it as therapy in its traditional sense, we are doing talking therapies here. We are sharing and vocalizing that. And I think the expression, and we started this during Jupiter in Gemini, from what I remember. And I think all of that mutable energy at the time when we came together to do what we're doing on this pod, I really feel that also played an incremental role in how I also am balancing out the need for expression, but also trusting the faith, because this has been a process of trusting faith. Like, we aren't relying on big media campaigns. We aren't relying on big things. And it's understanding that things do take time. And I think as a result of collaborating and working with you, I realized that no, things don't always have to be to the T, to the schedule, and to perfection. Like, Mimi has really taught me how to just do it anyway. Do it if it's whatever, how you portray it, whether it's colorful, whether it's messy, whether it's whatever. Don't think fine tune about the details, just do it. And I think that's something that my Saturn in Pisces really benefits from as well. So yeah, I think hopefully I've answered that.
Yeah, you definitely have. Yeah. I was just thinking that's interesting, especially since I was saying about the visibility stuff with Chiron and Leo, but yet that just do it anyway. That's the kind of sense that you pick up. I'm like, that's a bit ironic, isn't it?
Yeah. See, Chiron is living, breathing, and speaking within you, because that's actually so true. Because we spoke about that earlier on with Chiron, and then like I always say this in our private conversations. I think me being able to like post, even on TikTok, post on Instagram, like post our, 28 days of color. I think from that moment where you was like, no, our faces need to be on the cover art. And I was like, oh my God, why? And that literally felt like internal death to me, guys. But from that moment, it did something to me. And I think you don't realize how, even though that's a wounding that you still battle with and you still deal with, you empowered me with the ability to not feel afraid to show up in how I am showing up in the world. And I think that is the beauty of collaboration. And I think that wouldn't have come around if we didn't collab. Yes, we would have had conversations, but it was really that focal point in that really critical point where we were deciding our cover art. And he was like, no, it can't be cartoon. Like, we need to have our faces. And to me, that was horror. Like, I wanted the world to follow me and everything in between. And I think from then I realized that, oh, okay. And you mentioned something. He was like, no, we need to have our names on this. And I was like, our names? Like, people need to know our names. And I think from that really catapulted me into just being able to put myself out there. So shout out to you. Shout out to your Chiron and Leo for healing me indirectly through the work that we do and the collaboration that we do through this pod.
Yeah. Sorry, we just did like a piece. It's funny. But no, I appreciate you. Okay, so just as a reminder, we end the episode on our hot seat question, and I'm going to kind of remix it a little bit. I want to ask you, Emily, what advice would you give for anyone who's listening to work with their Chiron or Saturn? Like, if someone's like a newbie, yeah, how can they approach that?
Do you know what? My initial answer was going to center on like research and investigation and like understanding your chart, which I think is very important. But I'm not going to lie, my spirit straight away said to me, it's through life's experiences. The best way to unpack and discover the balancing energies, the polarizing energies, whether it's the squares, oppositions, is through getting your hands dirty and actually sorry, Mimi's closing her eye, so I know it's going to her soul, but I think the best way to really work with these energies is to actually be present in the physical experiences, first-hand experiences, getting it wrong, getting it messy, getting it upside down, and expressing that, sharing that. I think the reasons why they're, and just going back to some of the things that I know Mimi did with her Mother in the Wound and Mother in the Spirit podcast, like you were talking about stuff that were your real realities. And I think having an expression, it doesn't have to just be all raising or storytelling, which is big for us because we do have Mercury energy in our charts, but this could be artistic form. This could be clothing, this could be fashion, this could be a whole range of art, but finding an expression and an outlet, should I say, finding an outlet to express your first-hand experiences, your life lessons, the things that you've journeyed through, I think is honestly the best way to heal Because remember, we don't heal it entirely. It's a wound that we work through life, but it also provides soothing to that, which you are still journeying through. And I think also another thing that I want to say is collaborating, partnership. Not doing it solo. Yes, there are some things that you will have to journey through and do solo. That's important. And yes, that is part of everybody's individual journey. But I think in partnership, in community, and in collaboration, you really realize that, oh my gosh, we actually are journeying through similar things. And I think it's also important that one thing that my Libra sun friend has always said, that we are relational beings. We are here to form relationships and partnerships with others. So I think in as much as you're getting you're getting your hands dirty in the real experiences, and you're finding your outlet to express what you're going through, also understanding that partnership and collaboration is important in helping you identify, because then I think through our conversations, just to sum it up quickly, is we've realized that, oh my God, we do have the same first house, seventh house opposition. If we didn't have that conversation, we wouldn't have really been able to dive deep into today's discussion or even understand or realize that part about our charts. And that's why I say having conversations, getting curious about things that are going on with your chart, and finding your people who allow for that room of conversation to happen and instigate and take place is really important. So I would love to bounce that back at you, Mimi, and ask, as we do, I know you're simmering here, you're brewing here.
You said it so perfectly. Like I don't have anything else to say, because I echo everything. And just that last point you made about people who will allow you the space to do that, because this is like deep excavating of thyself.
Yeah.
And I think you need to have people in your corner who will allow for that and who are willing to be there for that.
Mm-hmm.
No expectation. And I just think that's just, all of the points are important, but that one I really just want to like pause with. So nothing to add, but thank you for that.
No, thank you. And I think, honestly, I always say this, and I know it's going to sound repetitive, but being able, as I say, it feels like therapy, even though we aren't in a traditional therapy phase. But I think the reason why we are able to do what we're able to do is because we provide the space. We are able to listen to each other, share our journeys and experiences. And we're talking about really vulnerable things that, we might have kept private and hidden for a very long time. So I just want to thank you for being that person who is able to hold space, but also I'm grateful, and I hope that, as our listeners listen, you realize that it's a mutual thing, that we do this. And one thing Mimi has always said is that we do things in mutuality. Like, it's not an exclusion thing. Like, this wouldn't be what it is if we didn't pour back into each other. So I'm just so grateful that I'm here doing this with you, and thank you for holding this space.
Thank you. So thank you so much for listening. Please share your thoughts. If you do investigate your Chiron, your Saturn, we want to hear from you. We have this like hope and vision to really be and share that communal kind of healing, as Emily was mentioning. And we are here to hear all of that. So please follow us on YouTube, Spotify, TikTok, and and Substack. Follow us, and we will speak to you in the next episode. Bye-bye.
Bye.